Welcome to the enablement video for XStore Point of Service's new feature, DTX Query Language, which is based upon XStore's existing DTX framework. In this session, we will overview the new DTX Query Language, or DTXQL, as well as review a new REST-based web service that is in XCenter that can accept and execute DTXQL. So what is DTXQL? It is a new query markup language for configuring queries that are executed by XStore and XStore's suite of products. And it leverages the data concepts such as the DAOs and the entities from XStore's DTX framework. It is XML based, whereas traditional XStore query configuration can contain any number of raw SQL strings. This new format does not, therefore making it much safer to use. So it's safer, but with a drawback that it is not yet as robust as using raw SQL as you would expect. But that safety allows us for exposing that web service that can accept DTXQL and execute it. So let's get right to an example. On the top is a traditional query that selects for DTX objects, in this case called customer accounts. On the bottom is the same query written in DTXQL. Notice the names of the queries are the same. The bottom example, the select from, is the actual DTX object name, whereas the top, the DTX objects are indirectly specified through the result class type given of the customer account ID. The DTXQL doesn't need the result class specified. It knows that you want customer account objects returned based upon the from attribute here. And also the query handler does not need to be specified for the DTXQL version. The system will determine the correct query handler based upon the configuration that is given. Lastly, you'll see that the where clause on the top contains actual SQL that is appended to the query. That is no longer existing in the DTXQL version. Instead, there is a where element with a list of required or optional fields that will narrow the search results of your query. The field name at the bottom is the actual field name from the DTX definition of customer account. The parameter name for this field is not specified, so the system assumes that you want the parameter to start with arg. So the parameter name is actually the same as the traditional version, arg last activity date. This is a traditional SQL query version. This is the vendor query that uses raw SQL to select information from the item vendor table. And on the bottom is the same query written in DTXQL. So the first thing you'll notice is that the SQL query handler specified for the first version is not specified for the DTXQL version. The system will assume the correct query handler and use it for you. If you tried specifying a SQL query handler for the DTXQL version, you would get an error. The next thing you'll notice is that the result class is specified for the DTXQL version. In this case, where you only want 2 fields back in your result, you can specify a specific result type. If you don't specify the result class for such a query, you would get a default query result object. The result fields for the DTXQL version are provided inside the select element, and there is no SQL element in the DTXQL version. Lastly, you'll notice that both versions have ordering. However, the traditional version is to append raw SQL through a suffix, whereas DTXQL allows you to specify a sort element in which you would specify the DTX field name to order by. So you can see from the examples provided that DTXQL does a pretty good job of eliminating SQL from normal XStore queries. So here are some additional features that I have not yet mentioned. The query's persistence manager type can be inferred by the system if it is not specified in the configuration. The framework will use the from attribute and the DTX name specified there and the mapping configuration in your system to determine the persistence manager type. And DTXQL can support additional SQL concepts that were not shown here due to space, such as table joins and where clauses, where most of the required and optional fields in a where clause are ANDed together You can OR them together if you specify OR elements around the required or optional fields that you want. And then subqueries are also supported. You'll find subqueries separated from the main queries at the bottom of your query config XML. They'll look just like DTXQL queries, but they'll have some reference elements to reference DTX objects and DTX field names from their parent queries. Lastly, max rows is one of the properties that is still supported for DTX queries. This new query language allows us to expose a REST web service that can accept DTXQL and execute it. You'll find this service in Xcenter's deployment for cloud. It is a post type service that returns query results, and if you try passing it any queries that contain SQL strings, those will be rejected and will cause an error. And also, any XStore point of sale client pointed to a cloud-hosted Xcenter will use this service when executing DTXQL written queries. And you can see an example of the REST URL here, and we hope that you find this service useful as it can be a powerful tool in your implementation. Thank you for watching this enablement video on DTXQL.